This is the news in brief from the United Nations. The Caribbean is ground zero for climate change, the UN Secretary-General has warned, speaking from Suriname, where 90% of its land surface is covered by rainforest. Antonio Guterres said that unfortunately, our warming planet is not the only challenge that the wider region faces. Speaking at the 43rd Caribbean Community and Common Market Conference in the Surinamese capital, Paramaribo, Mr. Guterres also called for immediate debt relief for developing countries whose development was being crippled by arduous repayments. The UN chief added that he fully supported the creation of a Caribbean Resilience Fund and the reform of the international financial system to help the region better respond and prevent massive vulnerability to external shocks. This included moving beyond the financial system's preoccupation with per capita income and establishing a multidimensional vulnerability index to determine access to finance support. New suspected mass graves have been uncovered in Tahuna, Libya, a Human Rights Council probe reported on Monday, highlighting continuing extreme rights abuses in the country that have affected children and adults alike. In Geneva, the Independent Fact-Finding Mission on Libya, known as FFM in short, said that a culture of impunity still prevailed across the war-torn country. It represents a great obstacle to national reconciliation, truth and justice for the victims and their families. Regarding Tahuna specifically, which is 65 kilometres from the capital Tripoli, the mission's report found evidence of widespread and systematic enforced disappearances, murder, torture and imprisonment amounting to crimes against humanity committed by Al-Qani or Qaniyat militias. Here's one of the investigators, Tracy Robinson, now.
The fact-finding mission has discovered 3 sites in Tahuna, where they've already discovered 4 sites of mass graves, and these 3 sites are sites which FFM believes are probable sites of mass graves. We don't know how many. These are sites which now need to be excavated, but there have been hundreds of persons who we know have not been yet discovered, who have been disappeared.
Staying with human rights, and a top rights expert has called for new corporate regulations to protect vulnerable communities from environmental harm caused by deforestation, chemical and plastic production and other activities. David Boyd, UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and the Environment, issued a set of recommendations on Monday covering human rights and environmental abuses. His blueprint also covers fossil fuel exploitation and other large-scale extractive activities by business entities that are harming people and the planet, and doing so unchecked, he said. Businesses operating in the global economy routinely abuse the right to a clean, healthy and sustainable environment and other human rights, Mr. Boyd insisted. The rights expert, who was appointed by the Human Rights Council, added that the most vulnerable people who are affected by business activities, children, women, indigenous peoples, local communities and people with disabilities, commonly face the worst obstacles to getting justice. Mandatory human rights and environmental due diligence laws are necessary to hold business actors to account, Mr. Boyd added. Among the laws on the issue of rights and the environment being debated today, the Special Rapporteur welcomed the European Commission's corporate due diligence proposal for major companies, which would have to be completed before they could compete for business in the European Union. Daniel Johnson, UN News. This is the News in Brief from the United Nations. UN Chief Antonio Guterres lent his support on Tuesday to international efforts to rebuild Ukraine, as a conference began in Switzerland to garner support for the war-shattered country. In his video message to some 40 country representatives meeting in Lugano, the Secretary-General highlighted the tragic human impact of the conflict, as well as the long-term challenges that lie ahead.
Russia's war in Ukraine has taken thousands of lives and forcibly displaced millions of people. Millions of Ukrainians have lost their livelihoods, and over half of the population is at risk of falling into poverty. The damage and devastation to homes, schools, hospitals and other critical infrastructure will take years to rebuild. This is a long road, but it must start now.
In addition to the UN, international financial institutions such as the European Investment Bank attended the meeting. On the agenda, projects to promote climate protection, the digital economy and the diversification of energy sources. The development comes as the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, launched a bid to help Ukrainian farmers save their summer harvest later this month. The $17 million project, funded by Japan, also aims to support the export of grain to unnamed alternative international markets, while also strengthening food security for countries that are dependent on importing Ukrainian cereals, vegetable oil and other commodities. It involves restoring storage silos for Ukraine's grain and also ensuring that the country's farmers have the tools they need to work in future, FAO said in a statement. A sharp increase in the cost of essential goods in the Central African Republic, or CAR, linked to war in Ukraine, will likely have a devastating impact on the already dire humanitarian situation there in coming weeks, the UN World Food Programme, WFP, said on Tuesday. Some 2.2 million people in CAR are already acutely food insecure, warned Thomson Fury, WFP spokesperson, who said that the global food, fuel and fertilizer crisis sparked by Russia's invasion of Ukraine will put basic food commodities and staples out of the reach of many.
The figure might not shock you out of your seats, but when you look at the population size, that's nearly half the population of the Central African Republic. We expect a 30% increase in rice, 67% increase for the price of wheat flour, and a staggering 70% increase in the price of vegetable oil.
To put CAR's food insecurity crisis into context, the country is on a par with Yemen, South Sudan and Afghanistan in terms of its proportion of acutely food insecure people. To Europe, where UN agencies have urged the continent's countries to find alternatives to child immigration centres. The facilities have a profound and negative impact on the health of youngsters, insisted UN Migration Agency IOM, UN Refugee Agency UNHCR and UN Children's Fund UNICEF. Detention is known to exacerbate psychological distress, the agencies said, highlighting that children held in detention are at risk of depression and anxiety, as well as violence and abuse. In a review of 38 European countries, the agencies uncovered many worrying examples of child detention, but they also found positive alternatives available to detention, such as supported independent living and foster and family-based care already in place in various European countries that offer viable and cost-efficient solutions for host states. Daniel Johnson, UN News. This is the news in brief from the United Nations. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres on Wednesday echoed strong condemnation of the killing of 2 UN peacekeepers in northern Mali. The Blue Helmets, who were serving with the UN Stabilization Mission in Mali, or MINUSMA, died when their armoured vehicle ran over an improvised explosive device some 60 kilometres northeast of Gao on Tuesday. Along with the deceased peacekeepers, who were both from Egypt, another 5 Egyptian Blue Helmets were also seriously injured in the attack on a logistics convoy on the Tessalit to Gao highway. The Secretary-General expresses his deepest condolences to the families of the victims, as well as to the government of people of Egypt, whose soldiers continue to pay the highest price in the service of peace in Mali, said Mr. Guterres' spokesperson in a statement, which also urged the authorities to bring those responsible to justice swiftly. MINUSMA noted that 177 of its soldiers have been killed since it was established nearly a decade ago, including 4 just last month. The head of the UN World Health Organization, WHO, has called on drug manufacturer Pfizer to do more to ensure that its new COVID-19 oral antiviral medication is available quickly and effectively to countries that may struggle to afford it. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus' appeal comes as confirmed coronavirus cases jumped nearly 30% in the past 2 weeks, with increased infections in 4 out of 6 regions of the world.
Our organizations are still trying to finalize with Pfizer the appropriate terms and conditions for low and middle income countries. This is delaying access, and some countries may choose to wait for a generic version of the antiviral, probably available on early 2023, and this will cost lives. I call on Pfizer to work closely with health agencies and countries to ensure its new oral antiviral is available quickly and effectively.
The UN Health Agency has been working with the Global Fund and UN Children's Fund UNICEF to help countries source antivirals when they become available. These include allocations of molnupiravir, which 20 countries have secured, and nirmatrelvir, ritonavir or Paxlovid, which 43 countries have expressed an interest in obtaining. On monkeypox, Tedros said that he continued to be concerned by the scale and spread of the virus. There have now been more than 6,000 cases recorded in 58 countries, said Tedros, noting that it was highly probable that a significant number of cases were not being picked up because of limited testing. Europe is the current epicentre of the outbreak, with more than 80% of cases globally. In Africa, cases are appearing in countries not previously affected, and record numbers have been confirmed in places which have seen monkeypox previously. To Brazil, where independent rights experts on Wednesday called for urgent reforms against racialized police brutality following the killing of at least 23 people by officers during raids and investigations. The development follows a raid on Favela Cruzeiro in Rio de Janeiro in late May, where nearly 24 people, including children, were killed after security forces reportedly fired indiscriminately. Most of the victims were Afro-Brazilians, said the Human Rights Council appointed experts, who called on the Brazilian government to adopt wide-ranging reforms to demilitarize all law enforcement agencies and address systemic racism and racial discrimination. In another incident, the rights experts described how 3 police officers reportedly used pepper spray and tear gas on a motorcycle rider of African descent after pulling him over and putting him in the trunk of their car, where he died a short time later. The experts reiterated calls to adhere to international standards that govern the use of force. It should only be used when strictly necessary to protect life or prevent serious injury from an imminent threat, they said. Daniel Johnson, UN News.